Fucking oh, okay, let's start with our law number 3. Conceal your intentions. Okay, judgment. Keep people off balance and in the dark by never revealing the purpose behind your actions. If they have no clue what you're up to, they cannot prepare a defense. Guide them far enough down the path, envelop them in enough smoke, and by the time they realize your intentions, it will be too late. Part 1. Use decoyed objects of desire and red herrings to throw people off the scent. If at any point in the deception you practice people have the slightest suspicion as to your intentions, all is lost. Do not give them the chance to sense what you are up to. Throw them off the scent by dragging red herrings across the path. Use false sincerity. Send ambiguous signals, set of misleading objects of desire unable to distinguish the genuine from the false. They cannot pick out your real goal. Transgression of the law. Over several weeks, Ninon de L'Enclos, the most infamous courtesan of 17th century finance, listened patiently as the Marquis de Chevigny explained his struggles in pursuing a beautiful but difficult young countess. Ninon was 62 at the time and more than experienced in the matter of love. The Marquis was a lad of 22, handsome, dashing, but hopelessly inexperienced in romance. At first, Ninon was amused to hear the Marquis talk about his mistakes, but finally she had had enough, unable to bear inaptitude in any realm, least of all in seducing a woman. She decided to take the young man under her wing. First, he had to understand that this was war and that the beautiful countess was a citadel to which he had to lay siege as carefully as any general. Every step had to be planned and executed with the utmost attention to detail and nuance. Instructing the Marquis to start over, Ninon told him to approach the countess with a bit of distance, an air of nonchalance. The next time the two were alone together, she said he would confide in the countess as would a friend but not a potential lover. This was to throw her off the scent. The countess was no longer to take his interest in her for granted. Perhaps he was only interested in friendship. Ninon planned ahead. Once the countess was confused, it would be time to make her jealous. At the next encounter at a major fete in Paris, the Marquis would throw up with a beautiful young woman at his side. This beautiful young woman had equally beautiful friends, so that whatever the countess would now see the Marquis, he would be surrounded by the most stunning young women in Paris. Not only would the countess be seething with jealousy, she would come to see the Marquis as someone who was desired by others. It was hard for Ninon to make the Marquis understand, but she patiently explained that a woman who is interested in a man wants to see that other women are interested in him too. Not only does that give him instant value, it makes it all the more satisfying to snatch him from their clutches. Okay. When the countess was jealous but intrigued, it would be time to beguile her. On Ninon's instruction, the Marquis would fail to show up at affairs where the countess expected to see him. Then suddenly he would appear at salons he had never frequented before, but the countess attended. After she would have been able to predict his moves, all of this would push her into the state of emotional confusion that is a prerequisite for successful seduction. These moves were executed and took several weeks. Ninon monitored the Marquis' progress through her network of spies. She heard how the countess would laugh a little harder at his witticisms, listen more closely to his stories. She heard that the countess was certainly asking questions about him. Her friends told her that at social affairs the countess would often look up at the Marquis, following his steps. Ninon felt certain that the young woman was falling under his spell. It was a matter of weeks now, maybe a month or two, but if all went smoothly, the citadel would fall. A few days later, the Marquis was at the Countess' home. They were alone. Suddenly, he was a different man, this time acting on his own impulses rather than following Ninon's instructions. He took the Countess' hands and told her he was in love with her. The young woman seemed confused, a reaction he did not expect. She became polite, then excused herself. For the rest of the evening, she avoided his eyes, was not there to say good night to him. The next few days he visited, he was told she was not at home. When she finally admitted him again, the two felt awkward and uncomfortable with each other. The spell was broken. Interpretation. Ninon de L'Enclos knew everything about the art of love. The greatest writers, thinkers, and politicians of the time had been her lovers, men like La Rochefoucauld, Molière, and Richelieu. Seduction was a game to her, to be practiced with skill as she got older and her reputation grew. The most important families in France would send their sons to her to be instructed in matter of love. Ninon knew that the men and women are very different, but when it comes to seduction, they feel the same. Deep down inside, they often sense when they are being seduced, but they give in because they enjoy the feeling of being led along. It's a pleasure to let go and to allow other person to detour you into a strange country. Everything in seduction, however, depends on suggestion. You cannot announce your intentions or reveal them directly in words. Instead, you must throw your targets off the scent to surrender to your guidance. They must be appropriately confused. You have to scramble your signals, appear interested in another man or woman, the decoy, then hint at being interested in the target, then feign indifference. On and on, such patterns not only confuse, they excite. Imagine this story from the Countess's perspective. After a few of the Marquis's moves, she sensed the Marquis was playing some sort of game, but the game delighted her. She did not know where he was leading her, but so much the better. His moves intrigued her, each of them keeping her waiting for the next one. She even enjoyed the jealousy and confusion, for sometimes any emotion is better than the boredom of security. Perhaps the Marquis had ulterior motives, most men do, but she was willing to wait, and probably if she had been made to wait long enough, what he was up to would have not mattered. The moment the Marquis uttered that fatal word, love, however, all was changed. This was no longer a game with moves, it was an art. Artless show of passion, his intention was revealed, he was seducing her. This put everything he had done in a new light. All that before had been charming now seemed ugly and conniving. The Countess felt embarrassed and used a door closed that would never open again. Do not be held a cheat, even though it is impossible to live today without being one. Let your greatest cunning lie in a covering of what looks like cunning. Observance of the law. In 1850, the young Otto von Bismarck, then a 35-year-old deputy in the Prussian parliament, was at a turning point in his career. The issue of the day were the unification of the many states, including Prussia, into which Germany was then divided, and a war against Austria, the powerful neighbor, to even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William, next in line to Prussia as king, was in favor of going to Even threatening to intervene if they tried to unite. Prince William's next in line to be Prussia's king was in favor of going to war, and the parliament realized the cause, prepared to back any mobilization of troops. The only one to oppose war were the present King Frederick William IV and his ministers, who preferred to appease the powerful Austrians. Throughout his career, Bismarck had been a loyal, even passionate supporter of Prussian might and power. He dreamed of German unification, of going to war against Austria and humiliating the country that for so long had kept Germany divided. A former soldier, he saw warfare as a glorious business. This, after all, was the man who years later said, "The great question of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions, but by iron and blood." Passionate patriot and lover of military glory, Bismarck nevertheless gave a speech in Parliament at the height of the war, fear that astonished all who heard it. "War into the statesman," he said, "who makes war without a reason that will still be valid when the war is over. After the year, you will all look differently at this question. Will you then have the courage to turn to the peasant contemplating the ashes of his farm, to the man who has been crippled, to the father who has lost his children?" Not only did Bismarck go on to talk of the madness of this war, but strangest of all, he praised Austria and defended her actions. This went against everything he had stood for. The consequences were immediate. Bismarck war against the war. What could this possibly mean? Other deputies were confused, and several of them changed their votes. Eventually, the king and his ministers won out, and war was averted. A few weeks after Bismarck's infamous speech, the king, grateful that he had spoken for the peace, made him a cabinet minister. A few years later, he became the Prussia's premier. In this role, he eventually led his country and peace-loving king into a war against Austria, crushing the former empire and establishing a mighty German state with Prussia in its head. Interpretation. At the time of the speech in 1850, Bismarck made several calculations. First, he sensed that the Prussian military, which had not kept peace with other European armies, was unready for war, that Austria, in fact, might very well win, a disastrous result for the future. Second, if the war were lost and Bismarck had supported it, his career would be gravely jeopardized. The king and his conservative ministers wanted peace. Bismarck wanted power. The answer to throw people off the scene was supporting a cause he detested, saying things he would laugh at if said by another. A whole country was full. It was because of Bismarck's speech that the king made him a minister, a position from which he quickly rose to the prime minister, attaining the power to strengthen the Prussia's military and accomplish what he had wanted all along, the humiliation of Austria and the unification of Germany under Prussia's leadership. Bismarck was certainly one of the cleverest statesmen who ever lived. a master of strategy and deception. No one suspected what he was up to in any case. He had announced his real intentions, arguing that it was better to wait on now and fight later. He wouldn't have won the argument since most Parisians wanted war at the moment and mistakenly believed that their army was superior to their Austrians. Had he played up to the king, asking to be made a minister in exchange for sovereign peace, he would not have succeeded either. The king would have distrusted his ambitions and doubted his sincerity. By being completely insincere and sending misleading signals, however, he deceived everyone, concealed his purpose, and attained everything he wanted. Such is the power of hiding your intentions. Keys to power. Most people are open books. They say what they feel, blurt out their opinions at every opportunity, and constantly reveal their plans and intentions. They do this for several reasons. First is it's easy and natural to always want to talk about one's feelings and plans for the future. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. Second, many believe that by being honest and open, they are winning people's heart and showing their good nature. They are greatly deluded. Honesty is actually a blunt instruction, which blood is more than it cuts. Your honesty is likely to offend people. It's much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you. And power will not accrue to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. If you yearn for power, quickly lay honesty aside and train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions. Master the art and you will always have the upper hand. Basic to an ability to conceal one's intentions is a simple truth about human nature. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear constantly, imagining that appearances conceal everything else would exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Simply dangle an object you seem to desire or goal you seem to. We cannot go around doubting the reality of what we see and hear constantly, imagining that appearances conceal something else would exhaust and terrify us. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Simply dangle an object you seem to desire or goal you seem to aim for in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearances for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you are really up to. In seduction, set of conflicting signals such as desire and indifference, and you not only throw them off the scent, you inflame their desire to possess you. A tacit that is effective in setting off a red herring is to appear support an idea or cause that is actually contrary to your own sentiments. Bismarck used this to great effect in his speech in 1850. Most people will believe you have experienced a change of heart, since it is so unusual to play so lightly with smoothing as emotional as one's opinions and values. The same applies for any decoy object of desire. Seem to want something in which you are actually not all interested, and your enemies will be thrown off the scent, making all kinds of errors in their calculations. During the War of the Spanish Succession in 1711, the Duke of Marlborough, head of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort because it protected a vital thoroughfare into France. Yet he knew that if he destroyed it, the French would realize that what he wanted to advance down that road. Instead, then he merely captured the fort and garrisoned it with some of his troops, make it appear as if he wanted it for some purpose of his own. The French attacked the fort, and the Duke let them recapture it once they had it back. Though they destroyed it, figuring that the Duke had wanted it for some important reason. Now that the fort was gone, the road was unprotected, and Melbourne could easily march into the French. Use this tactic in the following manner: hide your intention not by closing off with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desire and goals. Just not your real ones. You will kill three birds with one stone. You appear friendly, open, and trusting. You conceal your intention, and you send your rivals one time consuming wild goose chase. Another powerful tool is throwing people off the scent is false sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearances, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you and see through your act, seeming to believe what you see gives your words a great weight. This is how ego deceived and destroyed Othello. Given the depth of his emotions, the apparent sincerity of his concerns about Desdemona's supposed infidelity, how could Othello distrust him? This is also how the great con artist Yellow Kid will pull the wool over Sucker's eyes, seeming to believe so deeply in the decoy objects he was dangling in front of them. A phony staggered out a racehorse. He made it really hard to doubt. It's important, of course, not to go too far in the area. Sincerity is a trick. It will appear over passionate and you raise suspicions. Be measured and believable. Your use will see put on that it is. To make your false sincerity an effective weapon in concealing your intention, espouse a belief in honesty and forthrightness as important. social values. Do this as publicly as possible. Emphasize your position on the subject, occasionally divulging some heartfelt thought, though only one that is actually meaningless or irrelevant, of course. Napoleon's minister, Talleyrand, was a master at taking people into his confidence by revealing some apparent secret. This feigned confidence or decoy would then elicit a real confidence on the other person's part. Remember, the best deliverers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty in one area to disguise their dishonesty in others. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons.